Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Tom, and I'm back from winter break. I'm back doing my stuff, and luckily an album dropped while I was away, and it's a pretty big one, Dawn FM by The Weeknd. I'm going to be reviewing that, and I'm going to be reviewing Lawsons' finest sip of Sunshine IPA. We did this on the show a while ago for I think it was Lit or something like that. So go check that out if you're interested, but yeah, let's just jump right into these. So going into this kind of review, I've never really been a huge stan of The Weeknd. I've always been more of a passive observer. I've never really hated him, but I've never really fallen in love with his style before, so I've always just been middle of the road on him. But it's not like he isn't one of the more influential artists of our generation. You know, some of my biggest and funnest memories of high school is just Putting on the Hills by The Weeknd, and just putting my stereo in my car all the way up to 10 on the bass setting, and then just letting my whole car shake while I'm sitting outside the high school parking lot. That was a lot of fun. This is his 7th full-time release from Abel, aka The Weeknd, if you don't really count his trilogy of mixtapes that he made back in the early 2010s when he was starting to get really popular. That's what kind of blew him up. Obviously, this is coming off the heels of his very successful After Hours in 2020. That was right near the beginning of the pandemic, and tracks off of that just blew up so big for him. He even went to go do the Super Bowl, which I think he even mentions in this album as well as something of a marking point in his career, which I agree. I think he has probably seen maybe not the peak of his career, but definitely one of the higher points in the latter half of his career. When I listened to After Hours, it first came out, like I said, during the pandemic, so I said, you know, why not? I've never really given a full album listen to him before, and I've heard Blinding Lights. Obviously that was just a huge hit. I think it currently sits at number 2 as the second most streamed song of all time, somewhere like 2.7 billion, something like that. Kind of insane numbers to be putting up this late into his career, but I mean, the success speaks for itself. That song is a great hit, and when you listen to the full album, you hear all of this 80s nostalgia, all these synths, all these musical ideas ripped straight from that era. And obviously, it did have single power. Obviously, even without Blinding Lights, it had Save Your Tears, which had a remix with, I think, Ariana Grande. But just for me, the sound just felt a little tacky and non-authentic, like he was just more borrowing the sound and not really fully enveloping it in that sound. So while I thought the album was interesting, I didn't feel like he would be sticking with that sound for a long time. Then you got this album. This album dropped right a couple weeks ago, actually. I'm lucky I'm actually getting to it as quick as I am. And it really piqued my interest because it didn't have a lot of fanfare, at least for me. I didn't really see a lot of promotional material. I know he released the single Take My Breath, which was pretty lackluster. Just, it felt like more 80s. That's all we were getting. That one didn't even seem as cool as Save Your Tears or Blinding Lights did, with the way it kind of mixed a more contemporary sound to it. But with this album, I think that was the only single it released, was that one. And that being as lackluster as it was for me, it was not looking that great. It also seemed like it came pretty fast after Hours, because while it dropped right at the beginning of the pandemic, which seems like fucking eons away right now, his last full-length release, if you don't really count my Dear Melancholy, which was more of an EP, it was only like 7 tracks, was Starboy in 2016. So fans are used to waiting like more than 2 years at this point for an album release, probably around 4 or so. And with this one, it just felt like it came so fast. And also the fact that Blinding Lights is still putting out numbers, and the cultural relevance of After Hours is still pretty high. You got the Super Bowl performance. That was just last year. So the fact that he is pretty quick into putting out this new content is pretty alarming to me as well. Also, you got to think of the concept of this album as well, because you look at the name and the title and the cover. It's called Dawn FM. He looks old as hell on the cover. He's got gray hair and a beard. Are we gonna get something radio inspired because of the name? Are we gonna get something kind of cultish, like on the new Lil Uzi Vert album that he dropped a while ago? It's an interesting direction that he's going in terms of the direction and inspiration for this album. Interestingly enough for me, that's exactly where this album goes, both of those ways. There are little snippets of radio passages all across the album, even on the beginning of the album on the title track, where you have this ethereal voice actor saying like, oh, don't touch that dial, you're just now, you know, getting ready for the light. Are you scared? You shouldn't be. And so the way that they incorporate that is more or less the narrative of the album. It kind of ties together these loosely, you know, directed tracks in a way that wouldn't really have any structure otherwise. And I think it's noble of the album to go in that direction. But yeah, that's the main narrative to the album. And the concept of being on the radio station is interesting, especially considering its relevance culturally has drained since the era that the sound of this album is borrowing from, the 80s. That was probably, you know, maybe since the beginning of streaming and everything. That's when the dawn of cultural relevance of the radio era really started to wane since then. You know, you've got the compression in the spoken vocals that are just enough to not only immerse you in this 80s nostalgia, but also just enough to throw you off from recognizing that the voice actor is none other than Jim Carrey. I had no idea that he was going to be on this at all, but he does just a fantastic job of doing this narration. It's spooky the way he does it. Why Abel got him to do it, I'm not sure. Maybe it was just his work from Bruce Almighty, but still, his performance on the entire album is great. His voice is just mysterious enough to question his intent on where he's going, but it's serene enough to listen to him and accept the music that comes afterwards. He really is like one of the best points on this album. Oh, this was bottled in September of 2021. Oh, good. That's good. But for the rest of the album, what you get is pretty straightforward 80s stuff that he's been sticking to, even closer to his last album. But I think he immerses himself more in that style with the instrumentation. There's way more synths. The thing is synth-loaded. I'm pretty sure every single track has a synth. You've got these drum loop, very synthetic drum kicks and everything. Very pad heavy as well. What he's going for, you can obviously see what he's going for, but I don't think there's that one gigantic single that sticks out to me like a sore thumb, in a good way, that Blinding Lights did. It all just seems like a mishmash of him trying to steal from this sound without really giving it his own twist to it. Obviously, he has his own voice and things that he goes for, but I don't think he really achieves what he was doing on After Hours. It doesn't have that same originality to it, if that makes sense. You've got the same forlorn, loving lyrics that you're going to get on any kind of Abel album. This time they do have a bit more of a twist to them, and you know, the fact that they are more 80s laden. And there are two features on this album. They're both rap features from Tyler, the Creator, and Lil Wayne. I think they are separately bad in their own way. And I'm a huge Tyler fan. If you can't see it, you know, I love Igor. He's a great artist. Definitely in my top 5 favorite rappers. But he just sounds like he phoned it in on this one. And I think the choice behind that has to do with the production aspects as well. In this 80s inspired pop scene that he's trying to go for, there weren't a lot of rap crossovers, especially because rap was coming along in a totally different side of the music realm at this point. So what he was going for is such a weird choice to me, because it wasn't really authentic, and it just sounds like he really just shoved it in there to get a name in there. Why he went with Tyler and Lil Wayne, I don't know. He could have gone with someone a bit more numbers worthy. I know Tyler's done numbers, but not Lil Wayne recently. And the production end as well on this track, Here We Go Again with Tyler. It sounds like Tyler did the production. It sounds like his style that he usually goes for, but it just doesn't really fit with the song. It's very skeletal, if that makes sense. I feel like if Tyler was to release this on his own album or something, he would have put more into the instrumental, but it just sounds very like there's like 3 different kinds of instruments in there, and that's pretty much it. And you know, his delivery, he couldn't really be his total self. Obviously, he's doing a feature on a different album, so it's just going to be a straightforward rap verse. The flow was pretty generic. He just said you're going to sign this prenup over and over and over again. Just sound like he phoned it in. And the Wayne track on I Heard You're Married, You know, the track is enjoyable. It's got a good groove and passable vocals from Abel. But Wayne's feature just destroyed this. The potential on this. Maybe it's just the style choices put forth by both of them. But also Wayne just sounds asleep at the fucking wheel on this one. It sounds totally phoned in. The auto-tune just makes it sound like the producers had to Weeknd at Bernie's him around. I love Wayne, obviously. I love him and all of the albums he's put out previously. It was just sad to watch. I feel like he really kneecapped the potential of this track. But in terms of the rest of the album, they're pretty straightforward Weeknd tracks. Like, they're his vocals, but in terms of an 80s directed sense. Some of them are just Twitter scrollers. You know, you're going to put it on in the background and not really pay too much attention to it while you're scrolling Twitter. Some of them are pretty decent. I really loved Out of Time. That one sounded like the most authentic 80s inspired track. And you know, I've got parents that grew up in the 80s too, you know, so whenever we'd go on long car rides, I would definitely hear them put on a CD or Pandora of an 80s station. You'd get like Michael McDonald or a Robbie Dupree or a Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson, I think, is a very big influence on this album specifically. And while obviously he doesn't really nail the Michael sound, I think just the way his vocals sound in comparison to Michael, that kind of more high-pitched tenor sounds, that's definitely a comparison that I feel a lot of people would make. But you know, you can't really compare between both of them. He doesn't really have the same flair that Michael had, or the ability of songwriting, or the vocal chops. Obviously Abel's a great singer, but in terms of his contemporaries for this specific sound, I don't think he really compares. But yeah, I do have to give some shout out to the track Out of Time. I really did like this one. It sounded the most authentic to me. The vocal layering that he puts out there, the synth arpeggios, and the way that he does the songwriting. And it's a little bit slower paced too. It's not like a club beat that you'd hear from like Hall & Oates or some weird shit like that. The way he goes about producing that entire track, I think, is the most authentic to me. And I know authentic, apparently. I think my least favorite track has to go to Less Than Zero. It just sounded like a watered down track from like Post Malone or something. I feel like he would have stepped on this track and done it 100 times better. Really cheap synth notes that are rising throughout the whole track. Just sounds like some kind of crappy Casio keyboard you would find on the side of the road or something. It was just a throwaway millennial pop track for me. Really didn't see any value in it, and unfortunately there are a lot of those tracks on here. There are a couple interesting cutaways. I think it's Every Angel Is Terrifying has a cool breakaway that sounds like it's like an 80s infomercial, where it offers you like, oh, 3 easy payments of $29.99 for a trip to go into this afterlife realm. And I thought that was pretty interesting, the way that instead of just having all of the tracks be pretty watered down, just regular things with a very loose theme from Jim Carrey, I think that made it a little bit more immersive for me. This album was a bit more immersive in general than After Hours was. So at least it has that going for it, but in terms of the music aspect, it just didn't really follow through for me. I do want to give one more shout out to the closing track, Phantom Regret by Jim, which is the only real reference on the total album that it is Jim Carrey. It was a surprisingly beautiful closer, a spoken word passage from him mainly. There are little notes sung by Abel in the background there, but he's speaking on the feelings after death and how these feelings can reflect on your choices into the afterlife. It was extremely poetic for me, and the attempts to tie in the theming from the rest of the album, I think went over pretty well in terms of what he said. If you want to go listen and read the entire thing that he said, again, it is very poetic. It's still surprisingly serene for me, and at least it ended on a high note for me. All in all, I think this album is a very interesting one. It's very mysterious in its presentation with, this voice actor who's giving you little snippets of 80s radio talk that maybe it could be some kind of cult leader giving you don't let yourself think about it, just give in to temptations and let yourself do whatever you want kind of aspect to it. So that the way that they go about doing that, I think was a was a great hit. I think that was one of the highest points of the album for me. But in terms of the actual meat of the album, what it's going to actually be, what you're going to be listening to mainly, things you're going to be putting on playlists, or the Weeknd music on this, it fell short. And maybe that's because it is a bit of a longer album. Maybe it's just trying to, in this day and age, you're going to be putting out more and more longer albums so that you can see what sticks, because you couldn't really do that in the CD era because you had such limited space. But now that albums kind of lost their luster a little bit, I think artists are just going to be putting out more and more of these bloated. I mean, even look at the Migos. They put out like a 30 track album. All of them are crap, but maybe one or two of them are good enough to put on like Rap Caviar or something on Spotify. So in terms of the actual music, it does fall a little bit short. Again, there are highlights, but the way that he just steals sounds from the 80s don't really sound authentic to me. They just sound like he's borrowing this to put on for like some kind of costume party, really. Finally, we got a Northeast staple in Lawsons' Finest Liquid Sip of Sunshine IPA. If you haven't had this, you really haven't been to the area. It's just a classic IPA. 8%. It is a little bit heavy. But, we've been to parties, we've been to outings where this is definitely just going to be there. If you're not really into like a Bud Light or something easy like that, this is probably, in the region, probably the more popular IPA. And just like this album, I think it's pretty passable. I've got no real big issues with it, but it's just not flashy in its presentation or anything. I didn't realize before opening this one specifically that it was bottled in September of 2021, so it is a little bit out of date, which is why maybe this one doesn't taste as great. So but in terms of what it is, like, it's run of the mill. It's right down the middle for me. There's nothing really too flashy about it, but it's also not disgusting either. The Lawson's Finest is out of Vermont, but it's bottled in Two Roads, which is out of Hartford, Connecticut. So definitely classic in the area. I would go check them out. They have a whole lot of different other varieties of that flavor as well. If you're not a really big IPA fan, I could see why you wouldn't be into this one as well, but just a classic IPA. I really got nothing wrong with it. I figured it'd be interesting, like Sunshine and Dawn would be a cool combo to have for these two, but go check it out. They're just a classic beer, a real staple in the area. Overall, I'm going to be giving both the album and the beer the exact same rating, which is going to be a 5.5 out of 10. They're both slightly above middle of the road for me. They both have differing qualities to them that make them enjoyable, but nothing that really can sustain itself for a long time. Obviously, there are going to be huge stands of this album and this beer that will say otherwise, and will keep doing it forever, for at least for the foreseeable future. Keep enjoying both of them. But for me, I just think they're both pretty passable. I don't really have any huge issues with either of them. But yeah, guys, that's about it. Thank you guys for watching and sticking around. If you really could, drop a like, please, and please subscribe if you could, or just double check. Sometimes YouTube unsubscribes you from your channels, so if you could just go scroll down and just double check, make sure, even if you're not even, subscribe to anyone, just hit a little bit, just drop a little, sprinkle a little like down there, maybe a comment, maybe get mad at me for not being a huge fan of this album. Get really mad in the comments. I want to see some mad people in the comments. So just get angry. Let's see my Lawson's Finest Liquid stands getting really mad down there as well. But yeah, even like 80% of the people that watch these videos aren't even subscribed. So if you could just, hit the subscribe button. It doesn't. I don't know how much it helps you, but it really does help me grow from this channel. So I really appreciate that if you just drop that down there. Yeah, guys, that's about it. Take care of yourselves, wash your hair, brush your teeth, say hi to your mom for me, and we'll see you next time. Peace.